As somebody who's been living abroad for 12 and a half years, what I have to say is don't move abroad, don't become an expat, and surely do not become a digital nomad. Roll that intro. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. I am Rafael de Furia, back at it again on another Friday night to talk about life abroad, living abroad, and all of these wonderful things related to this topic. This Friday night, like the past couple Friday nights, we're talking about do or don't or this or that. Again, when I'm saying don't, I'm really kind of joking around here. Half serious. This series is more to get you to think about the realities of living abroad because there is so much to consider, and so much of the time it ends up being this very romanticized idea. And that's what I want to get into, is demystifying and deromanticizing, because that is when you really start to enjoy a place. I'll explain it like this. Say you're in a relationship, but the beginning, you start getting those butterflies in your stomach when you see the other person. There's something that makes you giddy inside, but you don't have a lot behind it. There's something not quite there. Something that time really brings along with it. But after you've spent time with that person, and assuming it's a loving relationship, of course, that person may still give you those giddy feelings, those butterflies in your stomach, but there's something there. There's something more. There's something that you know who they are. You know what they're about. You know the ins and outs. You know the details of that person. And those feelings that you might feel come from that place that you have built up with that other person, not just because you think they might be great. It's because you know they're great. But just before I get into the rest of this episode, and to get into the points that are really the focus of this episode, a huge thank you to the patrons who help to make content like this possible on a monthly basis. And of course, we are getting close to the holiday season. Santa's coming to town. Be sure to check out Not Your Average Globetrotter Gear, NYAG Gear, over on rafaeldefuria.com/NYAG Gear. Links are down below. You have plenty of time to get those stocking stuffers like shirts, mugs, baby onesies, more. Also, one other little piece of housekeeping just before we get into the rest. Keep an eye out for an update video, possibly next week. But anyway, to get to the rest of the meat and potatoes of this episode, talking about the relationships, that is only just the little teaser. That is only the taste of what's to come. But navigating a new system, that is a major part of moving to another country. You may think from growing up wherever you're from that things function the same everywhere. I thought that way. I know plenty of other people who do. And especially when we're talking about comparisons, the reason why there are so many comparisons between life in your country versus life abroad is because things are different. Shocker, I know. But really, when it comes down to it, there's not just the differences in the day-to-day, maybe going to the supermarket and they don't have baggers at the end of the cash register ready to help you with your groceries. I mean, I know now in the United States, you guys have Aldi and Lidl that has been starting to pop up, and you've been getting a little bit of a taste of what we have here in Europe. Nothing new here in a lot of places. Maybe if you go to a nicer place, that's a different story, though. But there's also the legal system, and to get used to the mentality towards things. Again, this gets into the everyday life. I mean, how you go about getting certain things done. Things taking slower, things taking this, or how to approach a situation. Do you have to puff out your chest and shout to get what you need? In some parts of the world, that's actually necessary. I've lived in places where if you didn't puff up your chest a little bit, then nobody was even going to pay attention to you. I mean, that may sound very brash to an American ear, especially somebody who's never lived abroad, that you have to really make a stand, even to just get something simple done. Or, I mean, even some parts of the world. I'll never forget a story that a family member has told me a number of times, that they were in Morocco many, many, many years ago. And every day, they would go to the little store across the way to get some bread, some cheese, and yogurt every day while they were there. Every day, the price of the bread was different, and it was necessary to keep negotiating every single day, even though the person who was working and running this store recognized my family member. Every day when this family member went, they had to negotiate again and again and again. In some parts of the world, you might find that. In Italy, maybe you might not find that so much, but you will find certain things maybe do have to be negotiated. But that's something I want to get into in a little bit of a later point. But another thing that I would like to get into is learning a language, something that if you've been watching this series and listening in for a while, you'll be very familiar with this concept, the importance of learning a language. Not is it only important for cultural purposes, for connecting with people, but for practical purposes as well. Getting things done. Things as simple as, again, going to the grocery store or even getting your utilities set up. Even if you speak the language in some places, utilities can be a little bit tricky to set up. I know I've had difficulties in Italy with making sure everything's ready to go. Can I do it? Yes. But if it's in person, then it's one thing. If it's on the phone, much more difficult. But one thing that I've heard so many people talk about is, wow, I'm going to move abroad. I'm going to learn a language. It's going to be so much fun. But it can be daunting, and learning a language may sound like a really cool thing to do and a lot of fun. But you will find there will be times where it can be fatiguing to get thrown in the deep end and have to speak the other language. Again, I'm saying it's very important to do so. But again, there's the reality that it comes with a little bit of baggage attached. Of course, there are languages that are easier and languages that are harder. But there's no language that, at least as an English speaker, that you're probably just going to walk into and have it easy. You'll often find yourself learning to walk again, learning to talk again, learning like you're fumbling around like a little toddler to be able to get simple words out. I know this happens to me, especially if I'm tired, that I can't get proper sentences out in any of the languages I can communicate in. But then, after being abroad long enough, then you get to the point where you have all these different languages in your head and you start losing your native language little by little. You guys have probably heard me complain about it in past episodes. I do truly feel as though it's becoming more and more difficult for me to speak my native language. And that is so frustrating at times, especially when I'm reaching for such a simple word. I mean, like it literally could be anything. And maybe it comes to me in another language. It could be anything from strawberry to, I don't know, toothpick. The next point that I would like to get into is about work. If you are able to keep your same employer, or if you're a digital nomad, this point may not apply as much to you. If you're a digital nomad, slightly though. But finding a job abroad presents a number of challenges, and not just even being able to work legally. That's a whole thing in of itself. To be able to get to the point where you can work in a country legally will depend on so many different factors. It depends on what part of the world you're going to. I mean, even like Italy, for example, to be able to legally work here, if you're not of Italian descent, or you somehow don't have Italian citizenship in any of the other ways possible, then you will probably need to get a visa sponsored out here. And that's not easy to do. You will find that a lot of employers really don't want to, unless you are so highly qualified and super skilled within your niche. But even then, like I've mentioned in other previous episodes, I have seen situations where Russians were hired over native English speakers for teaching English just simply because the school thought they could pay the Russian teachers less than the native English speakers. I mean, I'm not saying all language schools are like this, but when it comes to teaching English and language schools, those are really some of the places that a lot of English speakers, when they're moving abroad, will first look at, especially if they're trying out something new. They maybe are figuring out the new life and getting themselves reestablished. Here in Italy, and I know other places in the world where some of these schools aren't necessarily the most reliable, or I'll just say it flat out. There are a lot of sketchy schools that have really, really questionable business practices. And it's important to keep in mind the working rights that you may have in your home country or county, state, wherever you're from, may be different than those you might be able to expect abroad. There are parts of the world where an employer might hold on to a person's passport and maybe hold it over their head. Or not necessarily even to that extent, but in Italy, what I've seen time and time again, I mean, of course, this is not all schools. Don't get me wrong here, but there are schools that do have a tendency to not pay their teachers on time or even pay them months after a contract has ended. I've seen in extreme cases anywhere from 6 to 12 months or more after the working period has finished that some of these teachers still haven't even been paid. Again, this is the extreme situation, not unheard of. But there are more normal situations that we could say, like say you were hired to teach a weekly class or a twice a week class for maybe 3 months. You might not get paid until, well, not you might, in many cases, you won't get paid until after that whole section is over. And even then, there are plenty of schools that might not pay for like a month or two after that, maybe 3. That's something to keep in mind. Like, how much do you have financially that you can rely on just in case? And especially as an English teacher, in generally speaking, not one of the highest paid jobs. This can be a little bit tricky as somebody who is trying to rebuild their new life in a new country. But some of these reasons specifically about teaching English in Italy are among the reasons why I don't teach English in Italy anymore. I gave it up as soon as I could because I had some negative experiences. I had some really wonderful positive experiences. And there were even some places where I taught where I was paid monthly, regularly, no questions asked. They just did it. But then there were other places that weren't quite the same. Or then even beyond that, there are a lot of places that expect you to travel on your dime when they're paying you very little for a class. So you have to consider how much travel time and where you have to go and how you have to go. There are people who do this and accept this. But overall, I think it is a little bit of an issue because it does bring down kind of the working scene, in air quotes, for other people. There are people who are willing to do those jobs at lower rates. I mean, this is how the world works. There's always somebody willing to undercut somebody else. Unfortunately, in the end, kind of brings it down for everybody as a whole. The next point that I want to get into is about having to start all over again. I mean, like we've spoken about so far about navigating a new system and learning a language, starting out all over again can be very frustrating at times. Like, say you've had your life together, or even if you haven't had your life together, and you have to start rebuilding everything from the ground up. There will be times when you will be going absolutely mad, just bonkers. Because yes, like learning a language, it can sound really fun at first, but it can also be quite daunting to have to, again, get a new job, get a new apartment, get a new life, figure out everything again. And yeah, for many people, that will be exciting. And there is a really wonderful positive side to starting all over again. But I mean, even like going to my point about dealing with getting an apartment, for example, especially in some countries, like Italy is one of those countries where you see this more often. But compared to the United States, when you go for an apartment there, what you will often find is that you can sign the contract very quickly, right away, or very soon after you've seen the place, or sight unseen. And the contract, you just sign it and go. You get up, go, hit the ground running. But in Italy, it's not uncommon to negotiate a little bit some of the terms on your rental agreement. There is a common copied and paste contract that you will see often used. But even within that contract that a lot of people copy and paste from, they'll change a little something here, change a little something there. And sometimes the changes, maybe from a real estate agent who's not so knowledgeable, might actually create a contract that contradicts itself. I've seen this before. That's why I'm saying this. And you might find yourself in a situation with a horrible contract that is leaned completely against you. But sometimes you have to push back a little bit. And what could take in the States maybe an hour, 5-10 minutes, or even a couple days maximum, in Italy could take you a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. More. depending on the place and depending on how motivated the owner is to make sure that the place is rented. This is not unheard of to have to negotiate or to have a back and a forth. You send the contract to them, they send the contract to you, and the back and forth. I've had this happen. I have had this happen. This is why I'm talking about it. Really, before spending a lot of time in Italy, I would have thought, well, if you're going to negotiate, why would you negotiate a rental? Like, what's the point? You're not buying the place, but it's something worth keeping in mind. It's not just the places that you purchase that will have some negotiation. It's the places that you rent also. In many cases, although there are a lot of people who do come here from abroad and just accept things as is, I would say you don't have to do that. Not in every case. You can always ask if there's flexibility. And if there's not, then you can feel free to walk away or take it as is. This next point, depending on where you come from, may not necessarily apply to you, but if you're from the US, maybe Canada, probably especially Canada, especially with how polite people can be up there, you may want to take this into consideration that customer service is a completely different concept. It is something that is, I'm not going to say it's unheard of in some parts of the world, but you may as well say that for some parts of the world, or at least it looks a little bit different, or even the expectations that come to services and or purchases or different things. Americans tend to have a very high expectation for quick turnaround, or like, hey, I ordered it, it should be here. Let's make this happen already. Like, Americans are very, very fast paced. But then if you come to a Mediterranean country, things could slow down a little bit. There could be delays, and then those delays could have more delays. Anything is possible. Like, you can't expect that things are going to be going 100% perfect. You'll have to expect at some point, whenever you're doing something, that there could be a little delay. What I will say is maybe a little bit of an exception to this is Amazon. I'll get back to that in a second, though. And I feel like I've been mentioning Amazon a lot recently, and no, not sponsored. But if somebody with the last name Bezos would like to sponsor this project, I definitely wouldn't mind. But jokes aside, even the simple idea of returning an item. I mean, back in the States, it's almost practically like, I remember you could almost return anything, anywhere, as long as they carried it in the store. It didn't even have to come from the same store sometimes. Not that I ever did it, but I've seen people do this before. I hear about this all the time. But outside of the United States, my experience when it comes to returns is like, they almost seem to be non-existent. Like, you have to be pretty settled and sure of what it is that you're purchasing and that you want it and that you want to keep it, because taking it back is going to be impossible in some parts of the world. Like, return? What do you mean return? What are you going on about this return? No, you bought it. It's yours. Deal with it. But it depends, of course, where you are, because a lot of places, of course, if you open up the box and something is broken, then hey, that's understandable. But you might be in some areas where it's like, oh, but you brought it home. You must have broken it on the way there. That's not on us. That's not our problem. That's your problem. These things I've seen happen, unfortunately, in some places in the world. Or even Italy. Returning things here is not the easiest thing to do. But the exception that I've seen, like I was talking about before, is Amazon. When it comes to returns and customer service, they have an almost American approach. I'm not going to say it's purely American, but shockingly enough, I can say some of the best customer service that I have had here in Italy when something goes wrong has been from Amazon. Like, I've been really surprised how friendly they've been and how helpful they've been and how quick the turnaround, even sending an email, like very, very quick responses. I know a lot of people have had not the best experiences with them, but I have personally had, I can only say fantastic things about the services that I have been offered here. There are times when there have been items that didn't show up, which was really not okay, but they took responsibility for it, issued a refund, or offered me to get the same item. Like, I really do have to commend them on the way that they do things. And there was maybe only one situation where something didn't arrive and they said, we need to open up an investigation and this and that and the other. But after talking to them a little bit, They were like, you know what? Okay, we understand. We see the problem, and here you go. Here's your refund. That's respectable in my book. Another point that I want to quickly go over is about the opening hours of many stores, depending on where you are in the world. In Italy, for example, and other places on the Mediterranean, it's not uncommon for some stores to have an afternoon break, like siesta. That's a word. That's something that people do take in Spain. I mean, it's not an Italian thing, but people do embrace some aspects of the concept here, although it's kind of looked at more as going home for lunch because Italy, food, this is how it goes. But when we talk about things like banks, I mean, forget like convenient hours open during the day, like throw that idea out the window. In a lot of countries, I mean, some places you'll find maybe they're open 1 hour in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, depending on the day of the week, or maybe 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, or no hours in the morning and 6 hours in the afternoon. But if you can think of some combination of opening hours in whatever order, I'm sure it exists somewhere on earth. I mean, I've even seen banks in some places that have different schedules each day of the week, or they only offer some services on one day, some services on the other, depending on who's in the bank. And or even here to open up an account, I've had the situation where I actually had to make an appointment to actually open up an account. Or last year, I wanted to ask about debit card or credit card and having the ability to use that. Or no, it was actually this year. And partially due to the current global situation with my bank, but each bank, of course, handles it differently. But I had to make an appointment to go and do that. And even to open up my account pre-2020, I had to make an appointment to go do that. So this isn't something new because of the past 2 years. Wow, 2 years almost. It's crazy. It's almost been 2 years now. But like having in some stores a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, or 4 hour lunch break. I mean, okay, maybe a 4 hour lunch break is not going to be so common, but I have seen that when I was in Sicily, that there was some places I went to that were closed from noon until 6. I was really surprised about that. Another point that I want to get into is about something that I've said to myself, and I know a lot of other expats have said to themselves, is as soon as I move abroad, I'm starting a new journey and I'm going to start traveling more. I'm going to see the world. I'm going to use my new country as a base and all of these beautiful, fluffy ideas. Realistically speaking, it doesn't always happen. Not for everybody. You have to consider what is your lifestyle where you currently are. And yes, that may be part of the reason why you are wanting to leave your home country or the country that you've been living in. And yes, maybe there will be some aspects of the new country that you're aiming for that might agree more with certain aspects of what you want out of life. But realistically, if we're talking about traveling and this and that, out of the many, many expats that I've met and had contact with over the years, the majority of the people who I have seen take or be able to take, that's actually more important, is be able to take that time to travel around, are individuals who are retired already and have some funding behind them from their life that they've lived. For people who need to work and live a realistic lifestyle, it's very important to take into consideration, like I was saying, your lifestyle that you currently have. What do you do now? How often do you go traveling now? That could realistically be an indication of what you may experience when you move to another country full time. Yeah, okay, like if you're a digital nomad, this is a different thing. But when it comes to digital nomading, yeah, we'll turn that into a verb. There is also the aspect that you have to consider that you will not have a regular desk and a devoted workspace. That can sound really attractive. And trust me, I've thought about it. But working from coffee shops and from hotel rooms or AirBNBs, whatever it may be, could get a little old quickly. It's nice to have a dedicated space where if you're not going to be working in an office, that you can have that set up, ready to go, turn your computer on, flip the switch to turn the light on, have it set up exactly how you need. I keep pointing over here because that's how I have my desk set up. I have it ready to film I have it ready to record these episodes. I have it ready to work and to get what I need done. Like recently I was talking with some expats and one was joking around, you're not a digital nomad. I never claimed to be a digital nomad. You're a digital stay where you are. That's kind of what my life has turned into. The older I get, the more I've come to appreciate having a solid set of roots. I moved around a lot in my life, and the older that I get, the more that I kind of want to stay in one place for a longer period of time. But this last point that I want to get into is something that if you've been tuning in to Not Your Average Globetrotter for a while, you'll have heard me mention these before. Expat bubbles. They can be very hard to avoid unless you force yourself to move out into the middle of nowhere or to a place that is a small town where there aren't that many foreigners. I mean, even where I live right now, one of the reasons why I came here was so that I wouldn't end up living in an expat bubble. And in the past, I've had some very harsh opinions about these, but they do have their time and place. I still do have the opinion, though, that an expat bubble can really hold a person back. Let me explain what I mean by expat bubble first, just to be clear here. An expat bubble is something that I'll call a space or a group of people that you feel attracted to, a group of friends, a group of people, a social group, a social gathering, a social circle of people that you find yourself spending a lot of time with in a foreign location. That can be nice to have these people around who understand what it is that you're going through, who understand the struggles that you have, and maybe you can rely on them for certain things and they can rely on you. Have that give and take, like really building a community. But there's something to be said for, if you want to be around people from your own country, why don't you just stay in your own country? I'm not saying that you should, but again, just the reality, talking about this situation that you might find yourself in. I've slipped into it in the past, and I've seen plenty of other people do it as well. But it almost starts to create, and of course, this is all my opinion here. I don't feel like I have to really say that, but there are some times when people seem to be surprised that these episodes are my opinion based on my experiences and the experiences of individuals who I've spoken with over the years. And I'm here to create and share with you guys to help you guys during your journey to move abroad and live abroad. But it creates this filter that you start seeing through the American lens, if you're American, for example, or the German lens or the Austrian lens, wherever you're from, doesn't matter. Again, it can be easy to fall into out of comfort, that you're in a new situation and that you need something that's familiar. I definitely get that. And it's difficult to truly understand until you've been through it yourself. Maybe you can start getting a little bit of the theoretical idea, but once you've had the practical experience, that's when it really hits you the most. But when you're a part of these expat bubbles, an unfortunate side effect that I've seen happen to a lot of people is that they can end up falling out of touch with the locals, with the local culture, the local location, that they don't end up learning about how certain things are done there, or maybe why certain things are done there. They miss out on those little details, or maybe even finding out the cool places to go. Like, I mean, sometimes having a local to show you around and having the right local to show you around can really make a huge difference in your overall experience, because I've been places where knowing the right person allowed me to experience some of the coolest locations I've ever been to in my life. I mean, a public rooftop that nobody knew about in this one particular city. It doesn't even matter where, but just imagine your favorite, the most beautiful city on earth, and being let up onto a rooftop to be able to get to see everything. And it's a public place, but not even locals know about it. I've had experiences like that, and it's so much fun. But you only get that when you get to be around people who are locals or really have really experienced the place. Yeah, an expat can show you these things, but again, there are the wonderful things about the expat bubbles and the support there, but they can also hold you back and take away from your experience living abroad, unfortunately. And that's just, I think, a reality that's important to be aware of so that you don't fall too deep into it. Not necessarily a bad thing to have an expat community around you, but don't let that be your only outlet. I really so easily could get into the reasons why you should move abroad. And maybe that's something I'll make in the future. If that's something that you all are interested in seeing in a future episode, the reasons why you should move abroad, let me know down on the comment section below. If you're here on YouTube, or if you're listening in as an audio only podcast, come on over to YouTube. We don't bite. A lot of fun, great community around these videos, and there's always a great conversation down in the comment section below the videos here on YouTube. Anyway, of course, we are getting close to the holly jolly season, the winter season, and if you are looking for a stocking stuffer or a gift for a loved one, or even if you don't celebrate any of the upcoming holidays, maybe just a little gift for yourself, go check out the shirts, mugs, onesies, and more with designs like "That's it, I'm moving to Italy," "Nuff said," and a bunch of other Italy-related designs on rafaeldifuria.com/NYAG Gear. Links are below the video here on YouTube. Of course, all of that helps to make episodes like this possible, and even more so, a huge thank you to those of you who help on a monthly basis to help this project continue to go. Truly, thank you all so much for allowing me to be able to consider to move forward with this project. I really do appreciate it. Also, of course, as always, I'm Rafael Di Furia. This has been another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I'll see you all next time. Later.